Welcome to Life Stuff.
where we talk about
Life and stuff.
it's so it's
It's
so basic and yet life.
it's perfect.
Yes.
I know we've said this already, but it's just we really found our groove that we have always intended to find, and we took our time to get there. But because we had to try a lot of other things along the way, and we still have, because we tried those other things, we have other avenues we can use when it's appropriate. But
Yeah.
we really landed on something that feels so us, and that's why we're still doing it.
We talk about everything in our lives and outside of our lives and what's happening in the world and you know, so
Yeah,
it's
and it's all from our perspectives, obviously, and we just feel like we don't get a lot of that in the media landscape where it's not trying to convince you of anything, but it is from a specific perspective.
and we state our opinions on things, and what I always like to do is, because when we talk about life stuff, there's always lessons.
Yes.
And I'm big on, you know, like what can people learn from the life stuff we talk about,
Hmm.
and what we can maybe help people with that can relate to things we're talking about, what we're going through, right?
And we help ourselves in
Yeah.
these conversations, I think. Like
Yeah.
it's not therapy, but it's therapeutic.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that is often what art can be, because this is we're just creating something and willing to share it. Yeah.
So this is our first season of life stuff and our third episode, I believe, correct?
Yes, correct. Yes.
And this is our first one where we are going to have a guest.
Hmm.
I met Sam as in female Sam,
Hmm.
um, doing yoga. She was a yoga instructor who I really loved her classes. And then we went for a coffee one day, and now we're like best of friends. She
Yeah.
actually
And
just at her house last night.
when I came to visit Eddie, I actually got to meet Sam, and we did a little class together, and then had lots of life chats after that class.
Yeah.
Um, so
So
I
Sam is a yoga instructor, but she does sound bowls and she does, other things as well. Um,
and when we thought about having a guest, it was we didn't even have to. Both of us thought of her first,
yeah,
pretty much.
yeah. And so, yeah, let's bring her on.
I forgot.
There she is.
Hi, handsome boys.
Hello.
So good to see you both.
You too.
I introduced you sort of, but I thought we would leave it up to you to say what you do. I said you were, I met you as a yoga instructor, but you also do sound bowls and you do a lot of other things. So why don't you tell everyone what you do?
I'm a yoga instructor. I share yoga in various forms, and I've come to starting to say sharing rather than teaching. It seems like for some reason, I don't like this hierarchy that is associated with the word teaching. And the truth is that I'm a student. All of the people that practice with me are my teachers, if you will. So, um, and I'm also, this is a chance for me to say something that I'm really passionate about, which is helping people to understand that yoga is not only the physical postures, right? Yoga is so much more than just the physical practice. So I like to share yoga in all of its forms, whether it's that includes physical for sure for me, but there's devotional yoga, there's pranayama, there's all kinds of different types of ways to practice yoga which, the meaning of that word is oneness. So the idea that we're all connected, that we're all equal, I'll say that we're, at a soul level, we're one. So yeah. So that I guess what I do is share that message in the best way that I know how.
We'll put your contact information, everything below. Justin does that kind of stuff because you also do one-on-one like personal retreats. You do
Right.
classes, you do, so the question I have for you is with what you do and all the people that you see and is there sort of Justin, you can say it better than me because I told Justin what I was going to ask. Why don't you ask? Because I'm struggling with my mouth.
I would say, are you noticing any themes or do you sense any like dominant energies when it comes to how everybody is just dealing with the world around them, even as you've become, your own journey of like the teacher to the sharer of this information? And it sounds like the way you described it, it's not, yoga is not just a physical thing, it's a lifestyle. Like it's something that integrates into every aspect of your life. So for you personally, how do you see, or do you see some themes coming up when people are asking you to help them?
That's a great question. And the answer is yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So a couple of things. I'm seeing more openness, more people are open to the idea of, okay, there's a better way to live my best life from the heart.
As
Oh,
opposed to, I don't want to interrupt you too much, but as opposed to what? What's the, like they're seeing there's another way as opposed to the way that they're living right now, which is what?
which is, I would say, I've always done it this way, sort of stuck in the idea that I've always done it this way, and be more open to something different.
Yeah.
And I will say, I mean, this is the truth. I'm sensing there's a lot of frustration and anger. I'm feeling that from the outside. And then I, of course, look at myself and go, well, how much of that is a mirror for me? But I'm seeing that it feels like a lot of people are kind of there's a lot of suffering. I'll put it that way. It seems like there's a lot of suffering. And so I think the suffering is coming to the surface, and that's giving us an opportunity to look at how could we do things differently so that we can, I mean, there's suffering. This is life, right? But how can I manage my suffering? So
What kind of suffering? Like what are like with are people suffering with like self-esteem with yeah, like what kind of stuff?
right. So that's right. Self-esteem. And I think a lot of suffering with the relationship with themselves. I think people are coming, at least in my experience, which is all I can speak to, but people are questioning the relationship that they've had with themselves and want to have a better, more loving relationship with themselves. Like I often say, we're a lot of us are such assholes to ourselves. And so I think that's part of the suffering and part of the call to look at things, or maybe implement some practices that can help us feel supported, Yeah. And and Eddie, you and I talk about the universe, and it's a different word, for everyone maybe, or everyone can have a different word for that which is greater than ourselves. So I feel like more and more people are coming to that place where, well, I want to really trust in something. I want to believe in something greater than me, than my small self, my personality. There's something bigger. So
Yeah, these are, and it's interesting because these are themes that Justin and I often talk about. we all know I'm big on the universe and trusting the universe, but I think even our last episode, almost every episode we get into talking about loving yourself.
Yeah.
And before you can, um, I think, accept people in your life, or, I mean, it's a cliche thing, but before you can love somebody else, you have to love yourself. And we often talk about, well, how do we do that? You know?
I think, yeah, and I think that is because to me that was always kind of elusive. That it's like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna say to myself, affirmations every day. I love myself. I love myself. It's it's simple and it's not so easy. It's so much bigger than so it's like fine to say, well, just love yourself and okay, how? Like you said, Eddie, I mean, what are the steps that we can take to get to that place of self-love?
Yeah, and it's not something that there's like a roadmap that's going to work the same for everyone. And that's where we've definitely had these conversations end in a place where a part of it is just how connected can you be to yourself, and that will take time, in that it's a practice, like it's a daily thing to check in with yourself, to see how you're actually feeling, to be actually honest with yourself about how you're feeling. And that is its own process of understanding, well, am I trying to be happy because I think I'm supposed to be happy right now, as opposed to how I'm actually feeling, which is a little bit melancholy or whatever it is. But we have these heightened extremes that we really only know how to live in because we've been taught it's either you're really happy or you're really mad about something or you're really frustrated about something. But what about when you're just like it's a low grade, like it's just not, you're not quite sure, or maybe you don't quite know how you feel about something, and to not even judge ourselves for not knowing, but just acknowledge that that's where you're at. And that can be a place to start from, rather than all the other influences that we have in our daily life, which are never going to stop. It's
Right.
never going to be not that. It's part of living life as a human. And yet we are in this constant like, okay, can you take some time to figure that out for yourself before you come back to a group of people? Or what does that mean? And I can say all these things, and at the end of the day, that's just me listening to my body. You
Right.
listening to your body, Eddie listening to his body, is going to bring him to a different place. And that's its own journey. And to me, that is like ultimate freedom, when you actually are listening to your body.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if I could add to that as well, I mean, two words in there: practice and okay. And let me just expand that a little bit. I mean, it is a practice, and I mean that's what, Sam, you do. You help people, you guide people on practicing this, and it just doesn't happen overnight, you
No.
know.
Right.
And the other thing is being okay with, I go through that a lot and have been a lot lately. It's like, okay, well, I'm not particularly jumping up and down these days. I don't really know what my next direction is. And even this morning in my journal and my meditation, it's like, okay, just be okay with where you're at and trust that the universe has your back and something is coming. In the meantime, for people out there, while you're sort of believing in that or waiting for that, then continue to do your practice and sort of live the best life that you can live, but be okay when you have those crappy days,
Mhm.
because you're going to have amazing days too. So that's my little.
Yep, I agree 100%. And I think it's key. I think something that I've really been practicing the last while is that acknowledgement of, and more, the acknowledgement of the emotions and the acceptance of, instead of always trying to push away the so-called negative stuff, honoring myself. I'm feeling this way, and it's okay. I think that is key, acknowledging whatever it is we're feeling and letting it move. It moves more quickly through us, right?
I think this speaks to why people are afraid to let the emotions out is because they don't understand that emotions are just energy in motion, and that literally it's not going to stay there. It's not because you let yourself cry, or you let yourself feel frustrated, or you let yourself feel angry, and those are heightened versions, but there's so many varying degrees in between that you can also let yourself feel. That is just the motion of energy happening in you. And when you stunt it, that's when the body holds things in different places because it's trying to let it go. But your mind has said, based on whatever conditioning you have in your life, that like, oh, I can't, I'm not, no, I'm not supposed to feel that. So even the letting yourself feel it, I feel like what just and this is a big generalization, but just generally culture, Western culture, people that are open to these emotions are still reeling with how do they actually let themselves feel them, not let it derail them, but let it shake them a little bit. Like it's this idea that you actually trust yourself in the moment to know how to deal with whatever comes up. And I think that is its own practice that I've had to learn, and I'm still learning slowly how to deal with, because I don't know if I fully do trust myself in the moment sometimes to deal with the emotions that come up. And
Because
that's a journey.
because here's the thing. We've been taught not to do that.
Exactly.
We've been taught not to feel, not to express our emotions. I mean, I have a really hard time. It's
Mhm.
very, very hard for me to let it out because I think somewhere I was taught, I mean, I don't specifically remember that no, don't cry and don't feel, and that's exactly what you're saying, Justin. I mean, that's what people need to do that more. And I know, Sam, you've gone through some stuff, over this last 6 months where you've done a lot of crying and you've done a lot of releasing
Yeah.
and you're coming into an amazing place. And I think it's because you had to release all of that stuff, you know?
Yeah, it wasn't pretty, as you know, Eddie. It wasn't. Oh, I had some big ugly cries on a video call more than once, I think. And yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but not even just the big ones happen, but it's also letting all the ones that are in the in between. Like, we often think of life, or we've been taught to think of life as black and white, like it's this or it's that. And most of what we experience is actually more in this like in between. And those low grade emotions that we are also still needing to let out on a more regular basis so that they don't pile up and then have to be released as some massive explosion, which is not bad because sometimes that's absolutely necessary to move the
Right.
emotion. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. Then all the nuances, right? The nuanced, those are something happened just before we hopped on a call. This call, I got kind of a disturbing WhatsApp message, And I thought, because I was in such a great headspace and I'm excited about chatting with you boys, seeing you guys.
Mhm.
And it, this word is overused these days, I suppose, but it triggered me, and I thought but I stopped and I put my hand on my heart and I took a deep breath in and I let myself feel what I was feeling. And it wasn't, way up here, but it was moving toward there. And then I said, hey, that's really cool that and then I can come on here. I could shake that off because I acknowledged it instead of trying to repress it. I acknowledged it, gave myself permission to feel what I was feeling. And now I can sing Zippity Doo Dah again.
There you go. I think also connected to that, there's this we were, well, at least I'm practicing this idea of never, like, no judgment. The shame and guilt that's built up over the years of just like never being good enough or always striving for more, which I just think is an interesting thing to discuss, because certainly that motivation to always be better isn't necessarily a bad thing, but tipped over the edge of that becomes this idea that you're never good enough then. And that is to me, just as detrimental,
Yes.
because then we've tipped over an edge where it's quite hard to come back from because you're always searching. Nothing is ever good enough because there's always something to excavate. There's always something to analyze. There's always something. And when do we get to just be at peace? Sort of what you said, Eddie, about being okay with what is.
I think the reason for what you've just said, Justin, is because there's just so much on. People look at social media and you have to look a certain way, or you're not going to be accepted. That's just one thing, and the lack of communication that people have now.
As we're doing the self work, it can easily turn into it can easily turn a direction towards not ever being enough because we have the ability to compare ourselves like to so many more human beings than ever before. Once upon a time, all you could compare yourself to is maybe some celebrities because you watch them in the news or newspaper, but it's the everyday people in your life. Whereas now, via social media, you have the ability to compare your life to so many things. And comparing isn't necessarily the problem, but I think people dealing with the comparison, it's like a really slippery slope where all of a sudden, like their life is not good enough and everything they do isn't good enough because, well, look what they're doing and look what they're doing and how do they get to do that and I don't get to be this. And
People base their acceptance on how many likes they get and the comments, whatever, and it's so dangerous. It becomes like it's their what's the word? It's their
Validation,
the
right?
validation, you know.
Exactly. It can be used for good or evil, I'll say. It has some positive things too. But yeah, the
and it's
comparison.
not going anywhere. That's the thing. We talked
Oh,
about this a
no.
little bit last week. Like in order for us to like I like talking about it, but I also think as we continue to talk about this thing, we do have to start thinking about how we're going to create some boundaries or guardrails or just things that we can sense already are a positive way to integrate this thing that really ended up happening way faster than any of us could have ever anticipated or planned for. And I think that's why we find ourselves in this moment where it feels completely overwhelming because you're like, how do we get this message out there? Because it's such a personal experience that people are having on this like macro like app, for lack of a better term, because that's what it is. But you're the little person experiencing this, all these feelings based on this thing that's so big, and yet it's changed your whole life, your whole little life, just you sitting in your bedroom. And that is, like you said, it's so amazing because that's the reason that somebody's going to find you that would have never found you any other way. Somebody has found the Queer Network that would have never found us. And that's beautiful. But it also is really, it's really hurting people too, because they don't know how to deal with all these, as we were just saying, all the emotions that come up.
So
and
much.
and that's why, back to where we started with this is where it is about, loving yourself and accepting yourself and being okay with things, because this stuff that's happening with social media, and we've talked about this before, is that this is just now the tip, because now AI is coming.
Yeah.
And man, I think it's going to be 10 times what it is now, you
Like
know?
I've heard that they're now it's a law in California they just passed where students before they graduate high school have to take a class where they're going to better be able to decipher what's true media versus fake news. And that's where we are. Like and but I even feel that as a 35-year-old, like how am I to decipher even with everything that's going on in the Middle East right now, how do we decipher the truth when you have such polarizing videos coming out about both sides, and you have one side saying this, another side saying the other, and it's very hard to exist in the middle, and yet I don't know who to believe half the time.
Again, I think the relationship with our selves and always,
Mhm.
kind of bettering that, or
Yes.
right, it helps us to, because I think we know, we on some level we know, but other things get in the way. And so I think this really ties into the whole piece about, trusting in the universe and trusting ourselves to be able to, um, be discerning and to know what's true for us.
This phrase keeps coming back to me, and so I feel like it is part of what the world is reeling with right now because of globalization and social media. We have the ability to be so macro, like it's so fucking big, and yet you're still the only one experiencing your micro experience of just you. And I think we have to understand the difference between the two and how we sort of do breathe between them. We go big, and then we have to come back to ourselves, because if you live out there the whole time, I do believe you'll go insane. Like, it's just too much. We have to come back to ourselves, to our little experiences, not little in terms of less important, just littler in terms of size, so that we can have these moments. Like, this is healing for me. Like, just getting to sit, it makes me a bit emotional, actually, to just like realize that, and how grateful I feel to have even just y'all just sitting with me today to talk about these things in a safe space where I don't feel judged at all. I can share exactly how I'm feeling. I'm probably going to learn something about myself, about you all, and that is just as important. And I want to create space for that in my life, because that helps me as I deal with all the things we've already talked about in this episode.
The word that came to me when you were talking is sharing.
Mhm.
It's sharing with people and connecting with people and just being open and honest about how you're feeling. And some people won't get it, and that's okay. You know,
Okay.
no judgment. They're just, I think the people who are supposed to be in your life will come into your life, and then you're able to do that, um to just be yourself and let things out, and I think that's what's missing with a
Mhm.
lot of people.
I feel like I've been brought to my knees and I'm being called on to really become the best version of myself so that I can make the world a better place in some small way every day.
So how do we, what would you tell people? How do we get there? I mean, we can talk, we don't have to talk, macro, but just like for ourselves. Like, what's a good start? How do we get there?
I mean, really, I think a good start is carving out a few minutes every day to be with yourself. That's a really simple way. And I've got a program starting, I think, the 15th of December, where it's, an invitation to come to stillness for 2-3 minutes a day. For some people, including myself years ago, that was a really uncomfortable. I kept myself so busy so that I never had to be with myself. It was too painful. And so I think that's a great place to start, to simply take a couple of minutes where you come and sit and simply breathe and tune in. Sometimes I'll recommend that people pick one of the senses and say, okay, set your timer for 2 minutes and simply tune in to your sense of hearing or sight or whatever, one of the five senses, 2 minutes. That's it. And over time, with practice, that in itself. And then I think what happened for me is that, oh wow, I want to create more of that. And so now the most important relationship is with myself and the universe.
It's so wonderful to hear that. In that, like, that is really where whatever version of that is for you, for me, for Eddie, is where you will find yourself eventually. For those that are listening, again, back to being a world that likes to compare, it is so easy to say, well, I'm not there, but none of us started there. in
Right.
terms of my meditation practice, in terms of my stillness, in terms of my understanding of myself. But it just, I love the invitation that you offered of just 2 minutes, like, or a minute, whatever, or a moment where you just, and then
No,
eventually, I promise y'all, you will start to crave it. You will start to crave it, and that will be the motivation to carve out more time.
I think it's important to let people know that it's not always going to be easy, you know, even just a few minutes. But if you just we said the word practice, that's such a wonderful thing you can do to yourself. That's just like those precious moments where you can just spend it with you. But so many people don't know how to do it, or that's not what they've been taught. You said, Sam, earlier, like, it's just go, 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 and you just go, go, go because you don't want to be with yourself. I mean, there's
right.
so many people who can't be alone, and there's
Yeah.
a reason for that, you know. But once you start going in there, going inside and exploring that, like, a lot of stuff's going to come up too, you
Yes.
know, and
And
it
that's
goes.
why go slow. Go
Right.
slow. You don't have to go from 2 to 15 minutes if we're going to talk about, like, logical time. But just, the way you offered it, Sam, was just like, just plant a little seed and then let the seed germinate and grow and lay roots and go up through this, all the steps of growth.
Yes.
And along the way, allowing yourself to feel,
Mhm.
you know.
Huge, right? That's
So
such a great point. Yeah, exactly. Acknowledging and yeah, giving yourself permission to feel and without any expectation. And I think, Eddie, you and I have talked about this, that so many times people say, well, I don't know how to meditate, or I don't know how, I'm too stiff to practice yoga. That's another one, and that's like saying I'm too dirty to take a bath or a shower. It's like a meditation. There's no it's not about doing, you know?
okay, kids, well, I think that was great. I didn't even have to say, so what is the lesson here? Because there's a lot of lessons and a lot of guidance that I think we've given people,
Yeah.
you
And I
know.
think those that, like, have followed this journey the whole time, and I only can say it because I've experienced it by being in these episodes with Eddie and the guests that we've had. It's just, there's always such it's like a rotating wheel that we, like, go this way, we return to this point, we add that point, that we return to that one, we add a new one. It just sort of is, it really does feel like this cycle that we're just processing in real time. I was
Yeah.
saying to Eddie before we got on, it's not therapy, but it is therapeutic.
Ooh, I just got goosebumps. You nailed it. Yeah, that feels right. And my heart, I mean, of course, I love both of you, and I love sharing space with you. And I'm so grateful for this time. And we should, do this more often,
Yes.
like hang out
Yeah.
and
Well,
have.
we'll see. We'll talk about it. Let's see. No, just kidding.
I was like, what? You got to think
I
about
know. For a split second, I was like, that does not sound like Eddie.
good one.
Yeah.
Thanks for the
I
laugh.
just needed to lighten it up a little bit, you know.
Yes. Well
But
done.
no, it was amazing. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
And
having me.
I adore you and I adore what you do, and Sam knows a lot of people and has helped a lot of people and guided a lot of people. And one of the wonderful things that Sam does, tell them about the kitchen that you do.
Right. Well, at
You,
this,
you did it more, but now you're starting to do it again.
yes, we're having what do you call that? Like a band reunion or some, however they say that. But so at the beginning of the pandemic, um, the number of people eating out of the trash cans grew exponentially overnight. And we were not able to practice yoga where we normally do because the beaches were closed down. So I just started making food and taking it to the main square. And I had a dear friend helping me. And this grew over the course of the year. We fed 60,000 people, and it was all donation based and volunteers, people cooking and baking. And there was we used to say, and the guests used to say, So we were feeding 250 people at the peak. And the guests used to say, and this was it. It filled me up in ways that I couldn't. It was the hardest, most painful, and most beautiful time, honestly, of my life. It was the fellowship. It was like I say, the guests said, this is so much more than food. It was a big group hug almost every day when everyone was really going through hell. I mean, let's face it, that was a tough time. And so then we had donor fatigue and volunteer fatigue and all those things. And we stopped it after one complete year. And then we decided a couple of weeks ago, well, I think we're going to do this once a month, but make it more of a community event rather than a handing out of food. It's like some of us are going to bring food and we're going to share food rather than have people line up like we had during the pandemic. So Angel's Kitchen, yeah, that saved my life truly, because I needed somebody. Lots of times people say, well, I learned how to make sourdough, and they were laughing because everyone did whatever they needed to do to get through that time, and it was different for all of us. For me, that saved my life, being able to share that way. And
that's a good point. Like what something like that, what it does for you,
Right.
this sharing and this giving, like how it makes you feel, what you just said. I mean, and you can imagine like 250 people a day, like this was their lifeline,
Yeah.
and you created that, and that's amazing.
And
So
then letting it evolve,
yeah.
letting it change, letting it not, there was no, and it was clear, it was impossible to sustain that, but that it turned into something that could be this thing that now you look forward to every month, this gathering of community, fellowship, and just like that big group hug that we often need, but don't know always how to find.
And here's the thing, we never know like what you did for people. You don't know how what's the word? How it even went beyond that for certain people.
Yeah.
That was probably the only meal that some of those people had in days, and it even goes to something simple like walking down the street and saying hello to somebody and acknowledging somebody. You don't know what that could do for somebody,
Yep.
and we need to start doing more of that. We've talked a lot about, ourselves and like loving ourselves, but part of that to me is showing that love and that kindness towards other people, and we always say that's a good way to wrap this up, because what was that, Justin and I were trying to come up with an ending, and it was about being kind and showing love.
Because that's easy. It's actually not hard to do. Costs you nothing.
Exactly. And who is it, the Dalai Lama, that said, be kind whenever possible, it is always possible. And I think that's so true, right? It's always possible. And that's nice to me. Nice is different than kind. We can always be. There's never a reason not to be kind, ever. And I say that for myself, to check myself, because I can get cranky sometimes. But yeah, always be kind, for sure.
Yes.
Well, that's a great way to end it. So thank you again, Sam, for joining us. We will definitely see you again.
Thanks so much. What an honor, and just a pleasure to share space. I can't wait till the three of us share space here in person one day soon.
Oh, yeah.
I love you boys very much with all of my heart. So good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Love you too.
Awesome.
Talk soon.
Okay.
There are the hearts.
There's the hearts.
You got them.
Yay.
I finally added my heart contribution to the circle.
Honestly. Your magic, Justin. I want the magic.
Yeah.
You will find your magic. You already have a lot of magic. I've been in the same room as you, okay?
Oh, dude.
All right, darling.
All right, love you.
Bye, boys.
Bye, darling.
Love you.
Bye.
Love you.
Bye.
So